Hi everyone, this is Ayin from Mindful Creativity. I'm excited to share with you today my very first tangle that I've deconstructed myself. The name is called Mon-Ammis, and it's a play on the actual flower that this pattern was inspired by and the French word for mon-ami. And it has meaning to me because I have received beautiful bouquets of flowers from friends who are supporting me from afar as I go through my chemotherapy. And this little starburst flower really stood out to me, so I wanted to see how I could illustrate it and deconstruct it. And in doing so, I also found the steps in how I've created this flower are very meaningful to me as well. It starts with just very simple orb and dots, and then it blooms organically into a gorgeous flower that is all connected to the core. And in doing that, it really made me feel like I was connecting to the positive energy and the healing thoughts and well wishes from my friends who sent me the bouquet. So for me, this little flower has meaning, this little organic tangle, and it was a lot of fun to draw. So I wanted to share that today. So we're going to go ahead and follow our Zentangle steps. I'm starting with appreciation for the energy that I have today to create a video for you, appreciative of you for your support in watching my videos and learning from my videos, especially to my followers from my classes, as I still cannot teach my classes in person for the time being, but I'm with you virtually. So then we're going to go ahead and create our corner dots. And I'm going to stick pretty much with the classic corner dots. It's about a half a cm from the border, from the edge of the tile. But you know that in Zentangle, you don't have to be exact. But I'm using the corner dots and border to create a safe space for myself. And then for my string, I'm going to do something that radiates out. So I'm going to keep kind of like almost like a rainbow shape. There we go. There we go. So I've just divided up the space for us to fill with tangle patterns. And the first one, I'm going to start with a little corner here. And we're going to do our first mon-ami flower. And it starts very simply with a nice little orb in the center. And I'm going to place 6 dots very intentionally around the center circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is how I like to make the little petals around my dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's organic, so it's not going to be perfectly symmetrical. And that's fine, because in nature, nothing is perfectly symmetrical. And sometimes it works out to 4, and sometimes it works out to 6 petals, but that's okay too. Just breathe. Enjoy the process. Making my little flowers that almost look like little popcorn clusters also. And it's okay if your dots were not perfectly symmetrical around your orb. That's fine too. So now that I have my first circle, I'm going to go ahead and find spaces and gaps where I put my next layer of little flower blooms. Maybe just in between the flowers, like that. And then again, repeat the process of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can decide if you want them to be 4. You can decide if you need some to be 6. But I really like my count of 5 and how it works for my strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn the tile as you go so it's comfortable for you. Oop, that one's 6. But you see how it doesn't, in the scheme of things, it's okay. I'm going to fill in some more and make it bloom fuller. And you can see, you can place the dots where you want, in between the gaps of where the flowers are forming. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they can bump up against each other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have them drawn behind if you want, if yours are really close together. and just enjoy how the happy little flowers appear. It's up to you how many you want to put in and how full you want the flower to be. For this one, I kind of wanted to fill in more of this space, this first corner space. So I'm going to bloom out some more. And again, look for spaces where I want it to, there's a gap there, put another dot, a gap here, a gap here. It's fun to place the dots. That one's just on the side. There's another one here. I think I want one right there too. And then going back in and filling in the flowerets. They don't have to be very close together. You can make them farther apart as well, because the next step is going to be connecting them to the orb in the center. I'm just going to enjoy. This one's going to step out of the border a little bit. There we go. You can stop at any time you feel you have enough. I like to maintain kind of a roundish cluster, so I can see where there's some areas that looks a little bit jagged to me. I want it to be more round. So I'm just going to fill in a few more, and even one here that steps outside the border. And that's fine because we can. Feel free to stop and pause the video if you need more time to fill out your cluster. I'm just going to do some more roundness here. There we go. Putting in the dots to make the clusters look more full and round in the end. So there we go. And I'm happy with that. Well, maybe one more here. That's the thing. The more you look, the more you want to put in. And that's when I have to remind myself, it's not about perfection and knowing when to stop. You can always add more later. So I'm happy with how that's filled in my first corner. Now this is the part that I love, is connecting the center orb. I'm just going to reinforce that center orb and give it almost like a highlight. So you see how I've made that into a highlighted orb? And then we're going to connect that to the flowers around it. And what I love is this action to me made me feel like I'm connecting with all of my friends who sent me the beautiful bouquets and reminded me that they're there for me. Some of them are very close that I can see every day in my life. Some of them are a little bit further away. And you can see how I'm connecting those flowers as well. So very gently just thinking and drawing behind and connecting that. Connecting to the immediate ones and then thinking, drawing behind and connecting to the ones that are a little bit further away. But making sure all the flowers are tethered somehow to either each other or the center orb. Hence, I feel like I'm connecting with all of my friends from around the world, hence why I've called this flower Mon-Ammis. There we go. And adding those tethered lines really gives it some dimension as well. You can see how the density of the lines in the center are giving it a shadow almost. And that's where we'll be shading around as well. Making sure all of my flowerets are connected. And there we go. And then the last thing that I want to do is just to give it an aura around the flowers, almost protecting those delicate little tethered flowers to make sure they don't fly away. I'm going to do a little aura around each little flower. There we go. And in doing so, it creates a space for the flowers, maintains their shape so I can put other things around it. and it creates a really nice bigger flower shape as well. So that's how you create the Mon-Ammis. So around that, I'm going to do the same idea of connecting. Is I'm going to connect these two sides, and I'm going to use one of my favorites, which is Holaba. And I'm going to connect the Holaba with a little bit of an edge. You can see how I'm building a little bridge. And I'm actually going to kind of creep it around that bar, so it looks like it's actually wrapping around. And I'm going to do that all the way through. Wrapping it around the string. This one's going to be behind, so you don't really see it. I'm just curving the edges around the string so it looks like it's wrapping around the string. There we go. I'm just going to do more of these bridges all the way through, connecting the two sides of the string. Adding a little bit of a curve so it looks like I'm wrapping it around. Putting some in front, and then Holaba is about drawing behind. You can make some of them thicker and some of them thinner. You can weave. I'm just going to weave that one almost like a curve going around one end to another. So Holaba doesn't have to be just straight lines. You can do many different ways. That one's going to go here. Remember to breathe. Enjoy the pen strokes. And then I think I want just one here. I'm going to wrap around this end. And what I'm going to do is actually encase the ends here as well. So I'm going to put one here, nice little skinny one. We're going to build that to connect to this side. They stack on top of each other almost. There we go. So I've wrapped that. I think I'm going to do the same here where I wrap one. I'm going to have that come over to this side. There we go. Okay. It's a little bit of an empty space here, so I'm just going to do one more. That connects and goes behind. There we go. So then what I want to do is fill in these spaces with, it's Holaba, but I'm going to treat it like another tangle called Zeppel. I want to fill some orbs in these spaces that I've created. So how I'm going to do that is just squish an orb like I'm putting a drop of water into that space. And then these little intricacies or gaps I'm going to fill in and give it some drama. So it's like, what would it be like if I were to put a smoosh an orb inside? So here I'm going to do the same thing. So the corner, it's going to smoosh in there, and just like a droplet of water almost, jut out a little bit. And then we're going to smoosh another one in here. So the corners get rounded because you're putting an orb inside. And I'm just going to fill in that little corner to emphasize that there's an orb sitting inside of it. You see how that's coming together? And it's fun because your orbs take shape I'm just going to use that string as the guideline. I'm going to do a little bit of rounding here to make it not fly away. There we go. And a little bit of rounding here. There we go. You can see how a really cool organic little border is happening. And I'm just going to enjoy that process. And that one I'm just going to make into the corner orb for the string. And again, a little bit of rounding so everything stays connected. And here's my last one. That's going to just jut out a little bit on the top. And connecting it with some rounding. And there we go. It's kind of a cool shape. So here on this side, I'd like to have some more of my Mon-Ammis. And I think I'm just going to do them almost as like a border around. So I'm going to do one small orb here to start a Mon-Ami. I'm going to place some dots for the flowers. I think 3 will fit nicely there. We'll do our little flowerets. And then the next row with some more. That's going to be behind. And then one here to make it more round. And that falls behind the hollow bob border. There we go. I'm just going to connect those. I think that's good. I want it to stay nice and simple. And then I'm going to aura. Right around and connect it to the border. There we go. And do my little highlighted center, the center orb. There we go. So to define that even more, I'm actually going to do one more aura, a very thin one, just to define it even more. There we go. And I feel like I want that to be very defined around my border. So I'm going to go ahead and ink in the little tethered oar that I've just done around that. And that's about it. I quite like that. That looks pretty cool. So I think what I want to do here is maybe half of the Mon-Ammis just to fill up the space and make it into a border. And then I'll fill it with something. So I'm going to make my orb in the middle between these two. Then I'm going to make the dots for the flowers. You can see I'm doing it almost a semicircle. Grow my flowers. And then some in between for the next layer. Draw behind if you need to. Okay, and one more here, here, and here, just to make it more round. This one's going to fall behind. There we go. Make it the highlighted orb in the middle. And then we're going to connect. Apologize if you can hear the construction that's happening in the apartment above me. There we go, connecting all the flowers, giving it some density. I'm going to pretend there's some off behind there. Okay, maybe, nope, that's good. So now I'm going to go ahead and aura. Encasing all the little flowers. I'm going to do the same here. There we go. And then do the tethered aura. So that's going to come from behind. There we go. Doing the coloring in of the border, inking it in. Enjoying the process of inking it in. Remembering to breathe. There's my border coming together. And then one last one here. There we go. I think what I want to do for here is actually just play on the orb shape that happens as the center. And I'm just going to fill this whole space with tipple, which is orbs. So I'm going to find a space and just start with placing some orbs and filling in that whole space with orbs. Smooshing them together with a whole bunch of tipple. That's going to look really interesting once we shade it. And I'm using it as texture for my tile to give it some texture, keeping it organic with the flow. I'm not going to fill in the intricacies because we've done that a lot already. I want to keep some lightness, but with how we'll shade this after, we're treating it as texture and background. There we go. And I like how that turned out. So now we're going to move on to shading. For some of the shading parts, I might speed up. I'm trying to keep this as real time as possible, but I also want to maintain a length and viewing efficiency. So feel free to pause if you need to in areas, or speed up if I'm doing it too slow for you. That's the beauty of learning from videos. And I always want you to tangle at your own pace. So you can see how I'm going in and really tightly shadowing around this first bloom, because I want that to pop out on top, stand out. So I'm going to go all around this one with, I'm actually a little bit heavy-handed with the tight aura-ing that I'm doing with the graphite. And you can see how I'm turning the tile so that the point of my pencil doesn't invade the cluster. And then in the middle of the cluster, I'm going to lay down some graphite to emphasize the density of the center of the flower. There we go. So that one, I'm just going to use my tortillon and lightly start to spread out the graphite in the center, putting it behind the flowers and making that center space. I'm keeping the flowers quite white, but I want to put some density just behind them to make them stand out even more. There we go. And then we're going to tight shadow around the full bloom. There we go. You can see how that's really nicely popping off the page now, popping out. And I'm pointing the tip of my tortillon very tightly against the line of the aura that we created around the bloom. So you can see how we're keeping it really nice and clean inside the bloom and just doing the shadowing and having it sit on top even of the hollow shape. The trick is to learn how far you want to feather out or pull out this border, but I want to keep it quite tight. So it's really just emphasizing how the flower is sitting on top. There we go. And that bit gives it a pop. So now we're going to do the halaba. And for halaba, I'm going to put the graphite along the ones that sit along the sides of the halaba that sit on top or crosses over the other ones. So you can see how I'm following that one. It's one of the ones that sit on top. I'm just going to give graphite on either side of the bridge. I'm going to do the same to this one. And you do that when it sits on top and crosses over other strips. This is another one that sits on top. That one is underneath. There we go. This one sits on top here. I'm just going to put a little bit of graphite. And here's one that sits on top of a whole bunch. But you see I'm keeping the graphite very tight against the actual halaba lines. And that one. And at the same time, you can see that I'm also giving the little orbs shape that we put in between. There we go. And how much graphite you use, I'm just going to round that orb off, is something you need to practice. Everybody's hand pressure is different. Everybody's ability to blend or pull, the way that we want to pull and spread out the graphite is different too. So that's something you do need to practice. Just going to make that orb stand out. There we go. And just around that whole border, just to give it shape, to have that pop up off the page. You can see even just with that, without blending. So now we're going to go in with the tortillon. I'm just going to, again, point it towards the line and then very lightly smudge it out a little bit. I don't want it to become all muddy and dirty, but I do want to soften that. And again, I'm turning my tile each time to make sure that I'm pointing my tortillon towards the line that I'm highlighting here. Blending that out. You see how that shadow's already created? So I'm just going to go ahead and do that with all of my little bridges here. I call it softening and shaping because with light strokes, I'm also shaping the shadow. So here with the orb, you can see my strokes are a little bit different. I'm taking little circles and just softening and creating a highlight graduation like that. When I go back to the lines, it's more just tapering the shadow against the hard line. The trick is to make sure that you have a graduation of color from dark to light, which is what creates shadow, a contrast of dark and light. There we go. You can see how the orbs with that center glow, really make it look dimensional. Let me see if there's any that I missed. No, I think we're good. Everything's blended out nicely. There we go. You can see how dimensional that is now. It looks like it's popping off the page. Love it. So now we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of shading for each of these. I'm just going to do the centers to give them density. Just tightly laying down graphite around each of the center orbs. And when you blend out around the center orb, the trick is not to make the orb dirty. Because what will happen is if the orb gets dirty, you lose that little highlight dot in the middle. But no worries, you can always go ahead and take your white jelly roller pen and fill that back in. And you can see how I'm blending it, leaving it darker towards the center and just pushing out some of the graphite behind the flowers to give it more density, like that. And I'm keeping the outer edge whiter. It makes it a natural graduation of color, dark to light. And now I'm going to go ahead and put a bit of heavier graphite. So I want that to fall behind as the background, and I want the little Mon-Ammis flower border to stand out. So we're going to put graphite around each of these to make them pop up as we recede the tipple background, because I want that just to be a background texture. So you can see the graduation of color. And it looks like it has a little bit of highlight just in the center of that tipple. I'm going to keep that, but everything else I'm going to keep darker so it pops up. And there we go. So let's appreciate that even more. I love how we've done this little mon-ami shape with halaba and tipple. And I'm just going to give it my chop right here. Voila. Thank you for joining me for the session today. And until I can see you in person, I hope you enjoy these voiced lessons as we explore more with mindful creativity. Until next time, bye-bye.